The quantum processors at the heart of the Helios defense network died silently. There was no warning, no alarms, just a cascade of failures that rippled across the Andromeda Alliance's most sophisticated military installation. Admiral Cathor, his crystalline form gleaming under the emergency lights, watched in horror as centuries of technological advancement crumbled before his eyes. "How many systems are still operational?" he demanded, his translator struggling to convey the desperation in his harmonic voice. 17% and falling, Admiral," replied his second-in-command, her holographic form flickering dangerously. "The quantum pathogen is consuming our neural networks faster than our automated defenses can adapt." Similar scenes played out across thousands of worlds. The Andromeda Alliance, a confederation of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations, found itself helpless against an enemy that targeted not organic life, but the very artificial intelligence systems they had come to depend on. Transportation networks failed. Medical facilities went dark. Communication grids collapsed. The Zivstheri, masters of quantum computing, watched their mighty data centers fall silent. The Etherians, who had long since merged their consciousness with their machines, began losing entire populations as their neural interfaces failed. Even the ancient Viroxy, with their time-tested quantum defense systems, could not stop the spread of what they began calling the Silence. Earth's ambassador Sarah Chen sat in an emergency session of the Alliance Council, listening as civilization after civilization reported catastrophic failures. The human delegation, traditionally relegated to the outer rings of the chamber as one of the younger spacefaring races, found themselves the subject of increasing attention. The humans appear, largely unaffected, observed High Counselor Terra, their energy form pulsing with curiosity. "How is this possible?" Sarah exchanged glances with Dr. James Cooper, Earth's chief of cybersecurity. He stepped forward, his weathered face illuminated by the chamber's dying holographic displays. "We're unaffected because we're behind," he stated simply. "Earth still primarily uses classical computing systems, binary, digital, what you might call primitive." A murmur rippled through the chamber. The Etherian representative's form flickered with what might have been disdain. "You mean to tell us your technological inadequacy is now your shield?" "Precisely," Sarah replied, standing. "Our primitive systems are like a firebreak in your quantum forest fire. We've been studying the pattern of failures across Alliance space. We think we understand what's happening, and more importantly, how to stop it." The chamber fell silent as Dr. Cooper activated a simple tablet computer, technology that would have been considered museum-worthy by Alliance standards. The display showed a basic diagram that any first-year computer science student on Earth would recognize. "The pathogen operates on quantum principles, but it has to follow certain universal laws of information theory," he explained. "It's like a predator that's evolved to hunt only the most advanced prey. It doesn't know what to do with simple binary systems because they're too basic for its complex attack patterns." High Counselor Terra's form pulsed rapidly, their species equivalent of intense concentration. "You believe you can help?" Sarah nodded. "We've assembled a team of Earth's best programmers, network specialists, and quantum physicists. People who understand both our primitive systems and your advanced technology. We think we can create a vaccine of sorts, using classical computing principles to inoculate quantum systems against the pathogen. If we're right," Dr. Cooper added, "we can use Earth's global network as a testing ground. Our mix of old and new technology makes us the perfect laboratory for developing a solution." The Alliance Council erupted in a chaos of light, sound, and electromagnetic pulses as representatives debated. Earth's proposal was radical. It meant entrusting the survival of their civilizations to a species many still viewed as barely out of its technological infancy. A massive explosion rocked the chamber as another quantum core somewhere in the complex failed catastrophically. Emergency containment fields flickered. In the harsh light of that detonation, the choice became clear. High Counselor Terra's voice cut through the chaos. The Alliance accepts Earth's offer of assistance. Time is against us. How soon can you begin? Sarah smiled grimly. We already have. Dr. Cooper's team has been working since the first reports of the pathogen reached Earth. We've commandeered every major computer science facility on our planet. We're calling it Operation Legacy Code. As she spoke those words, thousands of human programmers, network engineers, and computer scientists were already at their stations. From Silicon Valley to Bangalore, from Tel Aviv to Tokyo, humans sat before screens filled with lines of code that would have looked archaic to Alliance eyes. The race to save galactic civilization had begun, and humanity's greatest weakness had just become its greatest strength. The basement of MIT's computer science building hummed with the sound of cooling fans. Rows of computers, deliberately old, deliberately simple, lined the walls. Dr. Lisa Rahman wiped sweat from her forehead as she stared at lines of C++ code scrolling across her screen. The irony wasn't lost on her. While the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy fought a losing battle with quantum computers, Earth's best hope lay in programming languages created before she was born. Got another core dump from the Zigzatheri backup systems, called out Miguel Santos, his fingers flying across his keyboard. The pattern's getting clearer. The pathogen isn't just attacking their systems, it's learning from them. Lisa rolled her chair over to his station. The data streaming across his screen would have looked primitive to their alien allies, but to her trained eye, it told a frightening story. The quantum pathogen was evolving, becoming more efficient at destroying advanced systems with each successful attack. Send it to the analysis team in Bangalore, she ordered, and get me a secure line to Ambassador Chen. The Council needs to understand what we're dealing with. Above their makeshift command center, the night sky was filled with the lights of alien ships. The Andromeda Alliance had positioned a significant portion of their remaining fleet in Earth orbit, partly to maintain communications as their quantum networks failed, but mostly because Earth's digital infrastructure had become the last reliable refuge in explored space. In a converted warehouse in Seattle, another team worked on a different aspect of the problem. Dr. James Cooper stood before a whiteboard covered in diagrams that would have looked familiar to computer science students from the 1990s. The quantum pathogen is like a predator that's evolved to hunt tigers, he explained to the assembled team. It's incredibly efficient at taking down large, powerful prey. But what happens when you throw it into an environment full of mice? It starves, answered Dr. Wei Chen, looking up from her laptop. Or in this case, it tries to execute quantum attack patterns against classical binary systems and fails. But how does that help us save the Alliance's quantum networks? James smiled, circling a particular section of his diagram. We don't save them, we rebuild them. From the ground up, using principles the pathogen can't attack. The idea was audacious. They weren't just trying to patch the Alliance's quantum systems. They were proposing to fundamentally restructure how those systems worked, incorporating classical computing principles as a form of digital immune system. In orbit, aboard the Alliance flagship Eternal Light, Ambassador Sarah Chen faced the difficult task of explaining this proposal to increasingly desperate alien leaders. You want to downgrade our systems. The Etherian representative's form flickered with barely contained outrage. Billions of our people exist as quantum consciousness constructs. What you're proposing would be like asking humans to revert to steam power. Sarah held up a hand. Not downgrade. Hybridize. We're not suggesting you abandon quantum computing. We're proposing to build a classical computing framework around it, like a shield wall that the pathogen can't breach. A holographic display showed the progress of the pathogen across Alliance space. More systems were failing every hour. The Viroxy had lost contact with their outer colonies. The Zigzatheri reported that their central artificial intelligence was showing signs of infection. Time is running out. Sarah continued. Our teams have successfully created a prototype system using salvaged Alliance technology, integrated with Earth's classical computing architecture. We can begin implementing the solution immediately, starting with critical infrastructure. Back on Earth, Lisa's team had achieved their first major breakthrough. On a closed network, they had successfully protected a quantum processor by routing all its operations through a classical computing framework. The quantum pathogen, encountering what amounted to a binary firewall, had been unable to penetrate the system. "It's working," Miguel announced, his voice carrying across the basement lab. "The test system has been running for 6 hours with no signs of infection." Lisa allowed herself a moment of hope. "Send the data to all teams. I want independent verification within the hour. And someone get me some coffee. We're going to be here all night." As Earth scientists raced against time, the situation in Alliance space grew more dire. The pathogen had reached the core worlds of the Ziggs theory. Their quantum networks were failing cascade, taking with them centuries of accumulated knowledge and technology. But for the first time since the crisis began, humanity had something to offer their more advanced allies: hope, wrapped in lines of simple binary code. The question was whether the Alliance would swallow their pride and accept help from a species they had long considered technological infants. In the MIT basement, Lisa's screen filled with a new alert. The Etherians had just lost contact with their primary consciousness archive. Millions of digitized minds hung in the balance. "Tell Ambassador Chen we're ready," she announced to her team. "It's time to see if this works on a larger scale." The fate of galactic civilization now rested on humanity's ability to merge the simplest and most advanced computing technologies ever created. And time was running out. The Etherian consciousness archive was dying. Millions of digitized minds flickered in quantum storage as the pathogen consumed their hosting systems. In Earth orbit, aboard a hastily converted Alliance medical ship, Lisa Roman watched diagnostic screens with growing anxiety. They had one chance to save these people, if they could still be called that. "Binary framework is in place," Miguel reported, his voice tense. "Classical systems are running at 98% efficiency. We're ready to begin the transfer." Lisa took a deep breath. "Start with a single consciousness construct. Let's prove this works before we risk millions." The process they developed was unprecedented, transferring quantum consciousness structures through a classical computing framework, using Earth's primitive binary systems as a protective shield against the pathogen. It was like trying to pour water through a mesh of electricity without losing a single drop. The first transfer began. On their screens, streams of quantum data flowed through pathways built from 20th century programming principles. The consciousness construct, a being who had lived for centuries as pure energy and thought, was being temporarily translated into simple ones and zeros. "Transfer at 20%, Miguel called out. "Quantum coherence is stable. No signs of degradation." In the corner of the medical bay, a crystalline ambassador from the Etherian collective watched with what might have been fear. Their species had abandoned physical form generations ago, transforming themselves into beings of pure quantum information. Now their survival depended on technology they had long since dismissed as obsolete. 50% complete, came the update. "Binary framework is holding. The pathogen can't penetrate the classical firewall." On Earth, Dr. James Cooper coordinated with teams across the planet, preparing for what would come next. If they succeeded in saving the Etherian archive, they would need to implement their solution across thousands of worlds. Every available programmer, network engineer, and computer science student was being mobilized. "Transfer complete," Miguel announced finally, running integrity check on the consciousness construct. Moments later, a holographic form materialized in the medical bay. The saved Etherian consciousness spoke, its thoughts translated into waves of light and sound. "I survive. Your primitive methods, they have preserved me." Lisa allowed herself a small smile. "We're ready for mass transfer. Ambassador, with your permission." The Etherian ambassador's form pulsed with what humans had learned to recognize as acceptance. "Proceed. Save my people." What followed was the largest data transfer operation in human history. For 18 hours straight, The combined computing power of Earth worked to save millions of quantum consciousness constructs. Classical computers around the planet ran hot, their cooling systems struggling to keep up as they processed amounts of data that would have seemed impossible to their designers. But it worked. One by one, the minds of the Etherian archive were preserved, protected within frameworks of Earth binary code. The pathogen, engineered to attack only the most sophisticated quantum systems, couldn't breach their simple defenses. As news of their success spread, other Alliance species began requesting human assistance. The Xixtheri needed help protecting their artificial intelligences. The Viroxi wanted to safeguard their time dilation computers. Even the ancient Helios Defense Network, still partially functional, requested human intervention. Ambassador Sarah Chen, addressing an emergency session of the Alliance Council, laid out humanity's proposal. We've proven our solution works. Now we need your help to implement it galaxy-wide. We'll need access to your quantum networks, your technological databases, everything you can share. Earth is mobilizing every programmer and engineer we have, but we'll need your species' expertise to scale this up. The council chamber, now lit by simple LED displays rather than quantum holographics, erupted in debate. What humanity was proposing would require unprecedented cooperation between species and a degree of trust that many had been reluctant to extend to such a young civilization. How can we be certain this transfer process is safe? Demanded a Xixtheri representative. Our quantum systems contain technologies beyond your comprehension. Dr. Cooper stepped forward. With respect, that's exactly why this works. The pathogen was designed to attack advanced systems. By routing everything through classical computing architecture, we create an environment it can't survive in. Yes, the process will be slower than what you're used to. Yes, it means temporarily simplifying some of your most sophisticated systems, but it will save them. In NIT's basement command center, Lisa's team watched as reports came in from around the galaxy. More systems were failing every hour, but now they had a solution. Humanity's digital warriors were ready to take their stand against the silence. How long to implement the solution galaxy-wide? Sarah asked her technical team. With full Alliance cooperation, maybe 2 weeks, Lisa replied. Without it, we might save some worlds, but we'll lose others. Sarah nodded grimly. Then let's make sure we get that cooperation. The galaxy's about to learn what humans can do with a deadline and a command line interface. The next phase of Operation Legacy Code was about to begin. Humanity's greatest technological weakness had become the galaxy's last hope for survival, and they weren't about to waste it. The Xixtheri Central Intelligence Core, housed in a crystalline sphere the size of Earth's moon, was the most sophisticated artificial mind ever created. Now it was dying. Dr. Lisa Raman stood before the Alliance Emergency Council, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. The core will fail within 72 hours, she reported. When it does, every eye-dependent system in Xixtheri space will collapse. Billions will die as life support systems, atmospheric processors, and gravity generators shut down simultaneously. The council chamber, now running on Earth-designed backup systems, filled with the equivalent of horrified murmurs from 24 species. The Xixtheri representative's holographic form trembled. Your solution requires us to temporarily reduce our central intelligence to what you call binary processing, they said. It would be like asking your species to survive with the brains of insects. There must be another way. Dr. James Cooper stepped forward. There isn't. We've tried every variation. The pathogen is evolving faster than quantum systems can adapt. Classical computing is the only thing it can't crack. In orbit around the Xixtheri homeworld, humanity's technical response teams worked around the clock. Miguel Santos coordinated with programmers from 50 Earth nations, their computers linked into what they'd started calling the Legacy Network. The binary framework is ready, he reported to Lisa via quantum-secured comlink. But we're seeing resistance from the AI itself. It's refusing to accept the transfer protocols. This was the challenge they'd feared most. The most advanced AIs in the galaxy were, by any definition, alive. And like any living thing, they fought against what they perceived as death, even if that death was temporary and necessary for survival. Ambassador Sarah Chen faced the HFY representative. Your AI needs to cooperate. We can save it, but only if it allows us to. The next 12 hours became a desperate exercise in cross-species psychology. While human technicians refined their transfer protocols, Zex theory philosophers and human psychologists worked together to convince an artificial superintelligence to trust in solutions it considered primitive. Meanwhile, the situation across the galaxy deteriorated. The pathogen had reached the viroxy time dilation computers, causing temporal distortions that threatened to tear holes in space-time. The Etherians, although their consciousness archive had been saved, were losing their ability to interact with physical matter as their quantum interface systems failed. At MIT's command center, Lisa's team monitored the crisis through a patchwork of classical and quantum communications. The displays showed an ever-growing list of critical systems on the brink of failure. "We've got movement," Miguel reported suddenly. "The HFY. It's accepting the transfer protocols." The operation that followed pushed Earth's technology to its absolute limits. The legacy network, a planetary web of classical computers, began receiving streams of quantum data. The AI's vast consciousness was translated into binary, protected from the pathogen by the very simplicity of its temporary housing. "Transfer at 15%, Miguel called out. "Binary framework is holding steady." In the council chamber, the HFY representatives' form flickered as their connection to their central AI weakened. "We're detecting personality fragmentation in the core systems. The intelligence, it's afraid." Sarah turned to Lisa. "Can we stabilize it?" "We can do better than that," Lisa replied, her fingers flying across her keyboard. "Miguel, patch me into the AI's communication protocols. Let me show it something." On screens across the chamber, a new display appeared. A simple binary representation of the pathogen's attack patterns, rendered in basic computer graphics that would have looked ancient to Alliance eyes. But in that simplicity lay a profound revelation. "Look," Lisa explained to the AI directly. "In quantum space, the pathogen's attack patterns are impossibly complex. But rendered in binary, its logic becomes clear, simple, predictable." The effect was immediate. The AI, seeing the threat reduced to understandable patterns, began actively cooperating with the transfer. Its vast quantum consciousness flowed more readily into the binary framework, protected by layers of classical computing that the pathogen couldn't comprehend. "Transfer at 60%, Miguel reported. "Quantum coherence is stable." "The AI is. It's optimizing our code as it transfers. It's learning to work with classical systems." What had begun as a desperate preservation effort became something more. A collaboration between human and artificial intelligence, between quantum and classical computing. The HFY wasn't just being saved. It was evolving, discovering new ways to process information through its temporary binary existence. As the transfer reached completion, a simplified version of the AI spoke through the chamber's communication systems. Its voice, usually a complex harmony of quantum frequencies, had been reduced to basic audio. "We understand now," it said, "your simplicity. It is not primitive. It is fundamental, essential. We see patterns we never could before." Sarah smiled. "Sometimes you have to step back to see the full picture." But their victory celebration was short-lived. New alerts flooded the displays. The pathogen had reached the Helios Defense Network's core systems. The quantum rebellion was about to enter its final phase, and this time, they would be racing against more than just system failures. They would be racing against the collapse of space-time itself. The Helios Defense Network's quantum core pulsed with unstable energy as space-time itself began to warp. The pathogen had reached the viroxy time dilation computers, and the effects were cascading through the network's interconnected systems. In Earth orbit, Emergency alarms blared through every ship and station. "We're detecting temporal anomalies spreading through the quantum networks," Miguel reported, his voice tight with tension. "The pathogen isn't just destroying systems anymore. It's causing quantum entanglement cascades. Reality itself is becoming unstable." Dr. Lisa Raman stared at the readings in horror. The Viroxy computers had been designed to manipulate time itself, allowing for faster-than-light communications and temporal shields that protected inhabited worlds from cosmic disasters. As they failed, centuries of carefully managed temporal engineering were unraveling. "How long?" Ambassador Sarah Chen asked. "Hours, maybe less," Lisa replied. "When the temporal shields fail completely, the shock waves will tear through every quantum system in the galaxy. And without those shields," she left the implications unspoken, "entire worlds would be exposed to temporal storms that could age them millions of years in seconds or trap them in endless time loops." In the MIT Command Center, Dr. James Cooper worked with a desperate intensity. "We need to implement the binary framework across all remaining systems simultaneously. If we do it in sequence, the temporal distortions will prevent half our transfers from ever happening." The scope of what they were attempting was staggering. They would need to convert every major quantum system in Alliance space to classical computing architecture at exactly the same moment. It would require perfect coordination between thousands of human teams and alien technicians across hundreds of light years. The HFY, now safely housed in its binary framework, offered an unexpected solution. "We have analyzed your classical networking protocols," it communicated. "With modifications, they could serve as a temporal anchor. The very limitations of binary computing make it resistant to temporal distortion." Lisa's eyes widened as she understood. TCP/IP, the old Internet protocols. They were designed to route around damage, to find new paths when connections failed. What if we used them to route around temporal distortions? The next few hours saw the most ambitious computer networking project in human history. Earth's programmers, working with the saved HFY, created what they called the Temporal Protocol, a modified version of Earth's original Internet protocols that could maintain stable connections even through distorted time. "Framework is ready," Miguel announced. "All human teams are in position. Alliance facilities report ready status." Sarah addressed the Emergency Council one final time. "What we're about to attempt has never been done before. We're going to create a galaxy-wide classical computing network as a foundation for your quantum systems. Every quantum processor, every AI core, every piece of advanced technology will temporarily run through Earth-based binary systems. It will be slower, less elegant, but it will survive." The Etherian representative's form pulsed with acceptance. "We have learned to trust Earth's primitive wisdom. Proceed." Lisa took a deep breath and initiated the sequence. Across the galaxy, human technicians executed their commands simultaneously. Classical computing frameworks activated, creating a web of simple, resilient technology that spread between the stars. The effect was immediate. As quantum systems transferred to binary processing, the temporal distortions began to stabilize. The pathogen, engineered to attack only the most sophisticated computing architecture, found itself trapped in rapidly shrinking pockets of quantum space. "Transfer at 40%, Miguel called out. "Temporal protocol is holding steady. We're seeing successful data routing through time-distorted space." In the council chamber, displays showed the progress. World after world, system after system, coming under the protection of human binary code. The great quantum networks of the Alliance were temporarily reduced to strings of ones and zeros, but they endured. Hours later, as the last systems transferred successfully, Lisa allowed herself to relax slightly. All critical systems are protected. Temporal distortions are diminishing. We've done it. The HFY spoke through the chamber speakers. We have gained something unexpected from this crisis. In our quest for advancement, we had forgotten the power of fundamental principles. Humans reminded us that complexity is not always the answer. Sometimes, elegance lies in simplicity. Sarah smiled. Does this mean Earth is finally getting that seat on the Alliance's Technology Council? The chamber filled with the equivalent of laughter from a dozen species. The High Counselor's voice carried a new note of respect. I believe we can do better than that. Humanity has proven that technological advancement can take many forms. Perhaps it is time for a new council, one dedicated to the integration of classical and quantum computing. A legacy council, if you will. As celebrations broke out across Alliance space, Lisa's team began the long process of documenting their solution. Future generations would need to understand how humanity's primitive technology had saved advanced civilization. The legacy protocol, as it came to be known, would become a standard part of all computing systems, a reminder that progress wasn't always about moving forward. Sometimes, salvation lay in remembering where you came from. In the years that followed, the galaxy entered a new age of technological development. Quantum and classical computing evolved together, each making the other stronger. Earth's programmers worked alongside alien AIs, creating hybrid systems that were more resilient and creative than either technology alone could achieve. And in universities across the galaxy, students of all species learned the lesson of the quantum plague. That true wisdom lies not in abandoning the old for the new, but in understanding that every level of technology has its place in the grand tapestry of civilization. The humans had a phrase for it, one that became common wisdom in the aftermath of the crisis. Sometimes you have to look backward to move forward. The galaxy would never forget.